friends, and welcome back to the Mythical Madam Podcast. I'm June, and tonight, as December settles in, we walk into the deep heart of winter. Before we dive in, a quick note. If my voice sounds a little raspier than usual, that's because I'm still recovering from being under the weather. So thank you for bearing with me and letting me bring this story, even though it's carried on a slightly scratchier wind tonight. So with that being said, let's begin. The nights are long, the winds bite sharp. Snow falls heavy across the mountains, muffling the world in silence. And in that stillness, she waits. Beira, the Kyliak, the queen of winter. She is vast, older than memory, with one eye that sees the turning of the seasons. Her hammer builds the mountains, her breath crawls the frost, and her cloak stirs into the seas of rage. To the unweary, she is cruel. To the land, she is necessary. Without her storms, there can be no spring. So year after year, she rules, from Samhain to Beltane, ushering darkness, sleep, and rest. For though her world is cold, it is not empty. Her winter is the pause before the song begins. A season of endings, yes, but also of waiting, of gathering strength, of trust that the light will return. A small note before we begin. These are myths, shifting, retold, and reshaped across time. What I share tonight is one telling among many, wrapped in a little storytelling and a little wonder. Before we get even deeper into this podcast, I want to honor the team that brings these stories from shadow to sound, Andy Lara and John Armstrong of Sun-Paced Media, whose work carries each voice from the past to the present. The Queen of Winter awaits us now. Welcome to episode 15. Legends say Beira simply did not just rule winter. She built it. The mountains, the valleys, the rivers of Scotland, they were not accents of stone and time. They were her craft. In her hand, she carried a great hammer, and with every strike, she reshaped the earth. When she slammed it down, peaks rose like teeth piercing the sky. When she dragged it across the ground, valleys opened, deep and endless. The rivers? They flowed where she wished, bursting forth where she struck the earth to quench her thirst or to drown her enemies. It is said that Ben Nevis, the tallest mountain in Scotland, was not merely her seat, but her throne. Imagine her there, an ancient figure cloaked in storm clouds, her one eye burning like cold fire, watching the land below. From that height, she decided the fate of the seasons. Sunshine or sleet, calm seas or whirlpools, a goddess perched on stone, whispering her will into the winds. And yet, for all her fury, her hammer was not only a weapon of destruction. It was a tool of creation. Every jagged cliff, every hidden glen, every lock gleaming beneath a blanket of mist. These were Beira's gifts, carved by stone and frost. Scotland itself became her story etched into the land. When travelers crossed the highlands and felt the bite of wind against their cheeks, they weren't simply braving weather, they were stepping into Beira's domain, walking through a world she had molded with her own hands. But of course, no queen rules unchallenged. And Beira's greatest rival wasn't an army or even another god. It was her own daughter, Brigitte. Brigitte is the goddess of spring, of light, of renewal. If Beira is the storm, Brigitte is the thaw. If Beira is the frost, Brigitte is the bloom that pushes through. And naturally, they clashed. Beira wanted her reign of winter to last forever. In some tales, she kept Brigitte locked inside a mountain, hidden from the world in a prison of stone and ice. Imagine that, deep within the cold, Brigitte awaits, her light dimmed, her voice muffled. Outside, Beira rages, cloaking the land in endless storms. It was the kind of rule that said, "You will not step beyond these walls until I allow it." But spring can't be caged. The moment Beira's grip loosens, even just a little, Brigitte breaks free. Picture her stepping out of the mountain, sunlight spilling from her hair, her breath warming the frozen ground. Wherever she walks, flowers bloom, rivers soften, birds returned, and suddenly, winter is no longer the master of the land. Beira sees this, of course, and she is furious. Legends say she lifts her great hammer and slams it against the mountains, trying to shake the earth back into silence. Storms crash, snows fall heavy, but it's too late. Brigitte is already here, and with her comes spring. And so it happens every year. Beira's reign stretches from Samhain to Beltane, from the first frost to the fires of May. Then Brigitte breaks loose, pulling the land toward warmth until Beira gathers her strength again and the cycle begins anew. It's almost like watching a mythic tug-of-war. Beira pulling with her icy winds, Brigitte straining forward with blossoms in her hair. And the people of Scotland didn't just see weather when the seasons shifted. They saw this family drama unfold them, a story written in storm clouds and sun. Sound familiar? If you've been with me since episode 4, where we met Moni Makhala and the thunder giant Riem Iso in Southeast Asia, you'll recognize the pattern. Once again, we see the clash of forces. Light held captive, storms raging to hold it back. Beira plays the same role Riem Iso once did, trying to smother brilliance beneath thunder and cloud. But just as Moni Makhala's jewel pierced Riem Iso's storm, Brigitte's light will always break through Beira's winter. So by now, we know Beira's temper was not the kind you could ignore. When it rose, the land itself bore the cost. Legends say she kept rivers bound under her command, damming them with great boulders until she chose to release them. Imagine her lifting a stone the size of a hill, tossing it aside, and suddenly, flood. Fields swept away, villages drowned, lives overturned in an instant. Her cloak, too, was no ordinary garment, woven from storm clouds, soaked in rain, edged with lightning. When she washed it, she chose the Corryvreckan whirlpool. Not a gentle stream, not a hidden loch, but one of the most dangerous seas in the world. The waters roared and churned so violently that even the bravest sailors dared not approach. For Beira, it was only laundry day. And it didn't end there. If displeased, she could bury farmland beneath snow, rattle rooftops with hailstones, or whip the seas into waves tall enough to swallow entire fleets. Her moods weren't just weather, they were survival tests. Yet there is a paradox at the heart of her storms. For all the fear that was brought, people also knew they needed them. Floods strengthened rivers, snowmelt nourished the soil. Her destruction was also creation. Beira was not cruel for cruelty's sake. She was balanced. Harsh, cold, unrelenting balance. Still, I can't help but picture her as the kind of neighbor you never dare cross. The one who lets you know exactly when you stepped out of line. Only instead of banging on the ceiling with a broomstick, she's just wielding a hammer that shapes mountains. You don't argue with her. You just put on another layer, wait for the storm to pass, and remember who truly rules the season. Beira is often remembered as winter's cruelty. But look closer, and she becomes something far greater. She is time itself. The ancients didn't just see storms when they spoke of Beira. They saw the slow grind of years, the weight of age, the inevitability of change. Her youth at Samhain, her aging through winter, her frailty by spring. This was not only a story of seasons, but of human life itself. Childhood, adulthood, old age. We grow, we fade, and then the cycle begins anew. In this way, Beira is not only a goddess of weather, but of fate. No king, no warrior, no hero escapes her. The mountains she raised reminds us of endurance. The floods she summons remind us of fragility. Under her rule, even the strongest must bend. And that, perhaps, is her truest lesson. Winter humbles us. It strips away pride, demands respect, and teaches that survival comes not from conquest, but from patience and adaptation. There's also something profoundly sovereign about her. Unlike many gods tied to beauty or war, Beira's power lies in necessity. No one chose her, no one prayed for endless winter, yet everyone lived under her law. In that sense, she is one of the most oldest archetypes of a ruler, one whose authority comes not from desire, but from inevitability. To endure her reign was to acknowledge that some forces cannot be bargained with. So when we speak of Beira, we're not just speaking of storms, we're speaking of age, of fate, of sovereignty itself, the kind that cannot be dethroned, only endured until the cycle turns once more. Most people know Beira as the Stormbringer, the mountain builder, the one-eyed hag who held back spring. But in older lore and traditions, fragments of her story reveal stranger and more surprising details. In some highland traditions, she wasn't just one goddess. She had 8 sisters, a whole line of Kaliaks, each ruling a different part of the year. Together, they divided the seasons like a council of winter women, handing power from one to the next. Beira wasn't solitary at all. She was part of a calendar written in goddess form. Farmers once watched her moods closely. If lambs were born too early, it was a sign that Brigitte had broken free before her time. And Beira would punish the land with storms to reclaim her crown. If lambing came late, people braced for a long winter, knowing Beira's grip still held firm. Everyday life, when to plant, when to travel, when to prepare food, was guided by her unseen hand. Even the year itself was sometimes described as Beira's body. She drank from the well of youth as Samhain, becoming young again. Through winter she aged, each storm another wrinkle, each blizzard another step toward old age. By spring she was bent and frail, a hag with one eye and straggling hair, until she gave way to Brigitte. And in fragments of Gaelic lore, some say she wielded not just a hammer, but a staff. With one touch, she froze the ground solid, and only when she laid it aside did the thaw begin. Some versions say she cast it under a holly tree, and others beneath a gorse bush whose golden blossoms mark the true start of spring. So you see, Beira wasn't only a goddess of storms, she was a living memory etched into the land. Every cliff, every scattered stone, every roaring whirlpool carried her presence. To the people who told her stories, she wasn't somewhere far away. She was the landscape. When you walk the highlands, you walk through her body. When you hear the wind, you hear her breath. She turned geography into mythology, and in doing so, she gave people a way to belong to their land. When we look beyond the stories, Beira also leaves her mark in history and tradition. In Gaelic folklore, the figure of the Cailleach wasn't confined to myth alone, she was part of seasonal customs. Farmers in the highlands once marked their presence in their year's work. The last sheaf of corn cut as harvest was once called the Cailleach, kept as her share of the crop. To neglect it, people believed, was to risk her anger and a lean year ahead. Place names across Scotland preserved her memory too. Hills and wells bearing her name could still be found. Like Ben Cruachan, sometimes called the Mountain of the Cailleach, or Tignan Cailleach, a remote site in Glen Lyon, where stone figures are said to represent her and are ritually tended even into modern times. These aren't just echoes of myth, they are like living traces of how communities once wove Beira into the very geography of their daily lives. There are also whispers of older ritual practices. Some traditions describe Beltane fires as marking not only the coming of Brigitte, but the weakening of Beira's hold. In others, wells and stones associated with her were visited with offerings, blending pagan reverence with folk Catholicism as centuries passed. Rather than fading with time, she adapted, moving from goddess to local spirit, from feared hag to figure quietly honored in small acts of respect. Through these fragments, Beira becomes more than a story to tell in winter. She is history layered into the land, remembered in names and customs and rituals they kept alive long after the old gods were thought to be long gone. So that wraps up the story of Beira, the one-eyed hag, the stormbringer, the shaper of mountains, and mistress of silence. She reminds us that winter is more than hardship. It's a long pause that gives life its rhythm. Her rain teaches us endurance, her storms teach us humility, and her silence teaches us to wait. If there's a lesson here, it is this. Winter might feel endless, but it's never wasted. It is the season that readies us, the rest before renewal, the cold that makes warmth worth cherishing. And as we sit here in December with Christmas drawing near, another figure stirs in the winter night. She carries not a hammer, but a broom. Her cloak is patched, her lantern glows, and children across Italy await her passing. Some call her the Christmas Witch. Others know her as La Befana. Next time, we'll follow her story from pagan goddess to epiphany legend to see how one old woman with a broom became one of the most enduring figures of the winter season. Until then, stay warm, stay patient, and remember, even in the heart of winter, stories walk beside us. This has been the Mythical Madam Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And make sure to leave your comments if you're listening on Spotify. Don't miss out on a single episode. Episodes dropping bi-weekly, so make sure to subscribe on the show on Substack at Mythical Madam and my YouTube channel. The Mythical Madam is produced and edited in partnership with Andy Lara at sunfacemedia.com. I'm incredibly grateful for the collaboration and support in bringing these stories to life. All of this and more linked in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.